The following program is rated TVMA. Viewer discretion is advised.
Welcome back to Tonetalks. I appreciate you guys using your Friday. Call in 323-879-4445. We want to hear from you. This is the point of doing these shows. You know, me and Yvette used to do the shows where we just talked to basically on Skype, or we did short videos. So we brought these talk shows in to be able to give you guys a chance to voice your opinion. We want to be able to give the black community a chance to speak on issues they normally don't get a chance to, but always think about. And one of those is interracial dating. I wanted to have this show. I wanted to bring Yvette on. We challenged the boundaries, as I said, both on Breaking Ground and Tonetalks. And I think one of the things that I see, and I want to go through the questions and bounce it off of Yvette. One of the things I see is that race as a concept gets confused with lineage, gets confused with ethnicity, and it leaves black folks confused about where they are, where they stand in this country, and what they need to do to move forward. And so let me go through the first question on this topic. What is interracial dating in a mixed up America? Does it even make sense? What is race versus ethnicity, social construct in race versus ethnicity with DNA, culture, and language? Yvette, correct me if I'm wrong. This is where before Brown v. Board, this is the way I understand it. Before Brown v. Board, it was basically black and white, Negro and white. And what that really meant is other and normal. Brown v. Board comes around and creates 5 races. It adds the Native Americans, it adds the Latinos, it adds the Asians, which includes Indians. It's just such an interesting construct. And what other institutions did or parts of government did is it followed the lead of Brown v. Board and also started using these 5 quote unquote races. But it's really built on 2 races and some ethnicities. And so what's interesting for black folk, and when I say black folk, right now I'm dealing with native, descendant of slave, black Americans, is that we are not African purely. What we are is an amalgamation of several parts of Africa, Benin, Congo, Nigeria, and some British or some Irish or some Scandinavian. So what's interesting is the limitations that we put on the construct of race are limitations that other people don't have to follow. Other groups don't have to follow, and we'll flesh that out in a second. Yvette, give me your opinion on this.
Well, you know what? Let me just say this before I say anything. What I'm really kind of tired of in terms of how we have this conversation is everybody saying, okay, here it comes. The access, everybody wants sexual access to white people. That's what it is. And that, this conversation has nothing to do with any kind of sexual access to anybody. Nobody is looking for permission to date anybody. You know what I mean? It's just this conversation. Everybody I'm so tired of that. Even in my comments, hey, you just want to date.
It's so limiting.
No.
Yvette, let me add to that. It's limiting in the sense that it doesn't deal with the context of the fact that you can't be part of no movement if you don't know who you are. And right now, Black America has a context around itself about a false view of Africa, the continent. You know, we just found out about the Dahomey women, the people in the Black Panther. They was protecting a king that traded slaves. The Dora Milaje were modeled after them. Come on. Do we understand Africa? And we don't understand also who we are here, which is we are both slave owner and slave. And that doesn't mean that we don't have a lineage claim. But what it does mean is that we done been here 400 years and built this place. What does that mean in terms of our access to the cultural value of this place? And how is that part of the solution? You can't be a perpetual outsider. Speak on that, Yvette.
Well, no, you can't. You can't be a perpetual. You cannot be a perpetual outsider. And that's what we've kind of made ourselves into. In terms of we're willing to just align ourselves with anybody who comes into the country because they're brown, I'm brown, if it's Crayola, we all on the same side of the Crayola box and the white side is over here, and so we just all go over here. And it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense in terms of politics. It doesn't make any sense in terms of lineage. It doesn't make any sense in terms of understanding who you are as a group, as a tribe. But if you want to talk about culture, what we talk about in terms of blackness, what I talk about in terms of blackness is how blackness is a creation of your oppressor. So how can I identify with something that is a creation? Now, people say, well, Yvette, why do you call yourself Native Black? Because I need you to take that black away because you gave it to me. You made it mean something, so now I'm owed something. But in terms of like, even when you read these geneticists and they talk about us having things in common, certain traits in common, a lot of those traits have to do with regionality. It still doesn't make a race.
Yvette, let me
made a race to put the failure here.
Let me jump in here too. So if you got somebody that's Indian and say black, right? They can marry an Indian person or a black person, but they also can marry any kind of Asian person. But we here mixed up with white and black, and we can't marry a white person because we marry outside of the race. The way we're treating this is as though we come from a small country, say like Nigeria, and we're 100% Nigerian. And then we're marrying outside of that 100% genetic like makeup. It's almost like an ego boost. And I argue that it's not even done consistently, which I'll get to in a second, in terms of gender. Whether we see it consistently if it's Serena Williams versus Michael B. Jordan. Do we see it consistently if it's an Asian woman with a white man versus a black woman with a white man? These are the questions that we have to ask if we're going to say there's a such thing as interracial dating. Because the argument...
Let me just say one thing. When you speak about Serena, let me just add a footnote. Serena's married to the Reddit guy. Let's not forget that Reddit refused to take all those for the longest time. It took them forever to take down all those racist subreddits, right? They called Chicago Tip Congo and all that stuff. I used to go on Reddit during that period. I saw it. And this is the person she's married to, and she's gotten zero in the form of criticism about that. If you want to take that role, I think you just have to be consistent. You can't go at me and accuse me of something that I'm not guilty of, or anybody else or the field sisters, by that matter, who challenge the notion of blackness too.
We got a caller. Let me bounce this caller in, Yvette, so we can get some fresh voice in this. Caller, what's your name? Where are you calling from?
Tony, Yvette, it's Reggie. What's going on?
What up, Reg?
Hello, Reggie.
What's going on? I had a.
This is Reggie from Boston.
From Boston. Since we're talking about interracial dating, and if we kind of frame it in terms of what you and Yvette talk about in terms of LCSC, a dangerous question now is a blonde-haired, blue-eyed white woman from here who screams reparations now at the top of her lungs, a better fit for a black man than somebody like Issa Rae.
Oh, wow.
Woo! See, and that's the conundrum, right? So what we've raised, both male and female, post college, is the Tyrone Hankersons of the world, little super capitalists. You know, we've raised a bunch of people who degrade black men and then say, I love black men, but only if their pants aren't sagging. And I feel like what's interesting is it better to be with someone, and Reg, if you're there, you can call right back in. Is it better to be with someone who has a politics that is conservative, but they look kind of like you? I'm just gonna say kind of, because we're so mixed up. We got so many different kinds of looks. Versus being with someone.
You saying I don't look like you, Antonio? You saying I don't look like you?
Yvette, I think you're a beautiful woman, but you look a little like me and a little like everybody else in America. And so, you know, what's a trip is let's come back to this, because I believe everybody should be able to marry who they marry. I still believe that we have a lineage claim due to being shut out for hundreds of years, and I believe that the two can coexist. But I believe that African Americans have basically been hustled with this concept of race. And that brings me to this book called Racecraft. Racecraft. is race used and moved around like witchcraft? Yvette, can you speak on the book Racecraft for a second?
Well, yeah, what they show is that, like, you know, like witchcraft, like when and they start with this.
Who is they? Who is they?
You're talking about the Field sisters. That's who did the book. And so what you're talking about when you talk about is Karen Fields and Barbara Fields, right? If you want to pick up the book.
Yvette. Let me jump in here 1 second, because I just got somebody. What's interesting? Somebody in the chat named Nazinga. We're in the middle of having a discussion amongst DOS, Native Blacks, and that's the problem right now. Who's in the room having this discussion with us? Now, I don't know her personally. I would like to know if you're actually a descendant of American slavery, because we're trying to build right now, and you're telling us that us building is BS. That's what she said. Now, I don't see how it's BS for us to challenge the boundaries of race in our own country and how race has been used to keep us from being normal. Now, if you do think that, you can leave the channel. But I find it so interesting that
because there's this whole conversation. Like, what we're trying to address is how race has been used as an albatross around our neck. And so we've been, you're black, you get marginalized. You remember somebody brought up something. Somebody said that you remember when on my show I brought up the guy Loeb who didn't negotiate with the sanitation workers, and that's why Martin Luther King came to Memphis and got assassinated. Somebody told me that he was an immigrant. So he got to come here and just be white, which really means just be normal.
Steve Jobs.
Martin Luther King and the rest of us got to just be black and just be put on the bottom. And that is the con of race.
Steve Jobs the same way. He was Syrian. I'm sorry I cut you off with Racecraft, but I want to hear the rest of your opinion on that. My apologies, Yvette. Can you finish?
No problem. But they talk about how witchcraft was this thing. That's what they start with. And it was this thing that you never really saw, but you were supposed to believe existed. And they burn people at the stake for it and say, well, this is an indication of witchcraft and all this kind of stuff. But you never really saw it do anything. It never was anything. And that's what racecraft is. It's like this creation of something that doesn't exist. And you remember for a long time they said we were intellectually inferior, right? And that was race. And so what we've really found is that, like, no, there isn't race. There isn't enough to build a race. There is enough to say that, like, there might be some regional characteristics that affect certain people because of evolution or whatever. But even if you look at people who are both white, who are in European countries, North Europe and South Europe, and see that they genetically evolved differently, you know it's not race because they are white. It's just regional differences. There isn't enough to build race, and they've just used race to create blacks. They can put us on the bottom. That's what we're trying to flesh out here, and you can't do that if you can't have an honest conversation. So Nzinga, whoever doesn't want to have an honest conversation, he wants to believe that, oh well, y'all just want white people. This ain't a conversation about nobody doing that. This is a conversation about like the dude who called in, Reggie from Boston, is really trying to talk about what role should politics play in your dating. Okay, if you look at race and you say that's diminished, then you say what role should you date somebody who is conservative and black? Is it better to date Clarence Thomas, or is it better to date somebody who might be white and leftist? These are just all kinds of questions that we have to be able to have an honest conversation, and you trying to censor me is not helpful.
And so, and what's the trip, Yvette, is we look at this thing and we have to ask, if I'm not 5%, and this is me, I'm 5% Nigerian, and I'm 7 to 10% British. I have a piece of me that's Scandinavian. I'm 30% Benin. I'm 20% the Congo and a mix of other things. 1% Native American. Looking beyond Native Black American partnerships, DOS partnerships. Looking beyond that, how is it within race to marry 100% Nigerian if I'm only 5% Nigerian, but out of race to marry a white person that may be 20% British? Has our technology, Ancestry.com, 23andMe, tore a hole in the whole concept of race? And I would argue, yeah. I mean, I think that in many instances, there was a great point made that led to a good discussion, but I disagree with the point where a woman came on my channel and she basically said, well, people procreate with people that look like them and share their culture. Well, in this case, what you have to look at is, well, you would have more culture in common being an African-American, 400 years in America, never been to Africa. And if with someone white, and then also you may even look more like the white person because of the mix that you are. There's this mythology that we look just like all the Africans, which look vastly different from Ethiopia to Nigeria to the Sudan. And so, like, there's this other mythology that we all look the same, too. And don't get me wrong, some of us look similar to some of them, but some of us look similar to white folk. And where does Yvette sit in this? And I think there's a lot here to unpack that everybody is being lazy with. And they're using a logic that is far dated and that science has pushed past. I believe everybody should be with who they want to be with. But if we're going to use that math, then everybody has to follow that math consistently. And we'll get to that in a second. What do you think, Yvette?
Well, yeah, I think part of what you and I are kind of bumping up against too, and very dangerously, is what happens is like white people created this race thing to kind of oppress us, and then our reaction to that was to grab hold of it tighter, and say like, I'm black and I'm proud, not understanding that was exactly what they intended, for us to be proud of something that then they can use to like further tighten the screws and submit us into an underclass. And so, and I'm not blaming the people who said that, because they didn't have the information and the science and everything that we have now, and even the wealth data, to understand what that was going to mean. But now that we do understand what that has meant for us, we have to understand, okay, how do we come outside of that? How do we understand? And even as we understand culture, the example I always use, people say, I'm not nothing like white people. No, well, you might season your food better, but you're a lot like the people, because we share a lot of the same culture. If you walk into a bar in America, they're going to be playing some type of sport or whatever. And usually if you're a dude, you can identify, even if you're a black dude, you can talk to the white dude about whatever kind of sport, because most men like sports. You can look at the surveys or whatever. You can go up there, you're going to be able to sit at the bar and have a conversation. Even if you don't like the sports, you're going to be able to sit and have a conversation and have a Bud Light or a Blue Moon or whatever you're drinking on, because that's like a culturally normal thing to do.
And you're going to have the same Thanksgiving food as well. The turkey, ain't going to be no dishes. Ain't no be out the box dishes. And understand, I'm not saying that new immigrant Africans don't have a place in this discussion if they are allies. But if they are allies in us learning who we are, because the reality is this construct of race that we've created seems a bit ahistorical. This world of a southern plantation that was the only actor, that the North wasn't involved, that Benin wasn't involved, Benin that was formerly called Dahomey. I'm going to take a caller right now. Caller, what's your name? Where are you calling from? You can turn the background down, please.
Yep, I got you. Hey, it's Jason from L.A.
Hey, Jay. What's up, man? What's your take on this?
All right. So I wanted to continue on that. I think Yvette's talk about culture. I think we were having this conversation on the Facebook. That was me, Jason, on there. And with the person talking about trying to connect race and culture. And it's just, when people do that all the time, where they say, well, people want to preserve their culture, so they want to marry an Asian person. When, in reality, it really comes down to like class, caste, and like wealth. When somebody gets married, they technically, marrying somebody that looks like them is usually only due to like proximity. Like, when you're in the middle of Africa, you're going to marry the people who are around you in the country around you within 100 miles or so. And, most people don't even leave their state. So that's why you're going to marry the person that's going to be there.
Let me flesh this out with another question to you and Yvette.
Of course.
Do we judge interracial dating the same if it's a black woman marrying out of race? Say Serena Williams, Meghan Markle, we got many examples of this thing. Kamala Harris. Do we judge it the same if it's a black man marrying a minority, David Chappelle? If he's with a white woman versus I think he's with an Asian woman, some type of Asian woman. But what if it's an Asian woman or a Latino with a white person? Do we even see it? It could be an old Asian man in the airport with a young Asian lady, and they just together holding hands. Do we even see that? This interracial concept seems like we only see it in certain light, and then we boost it up. I'm gonna give a piece of data on the other side. I want to know what you think, caller.
Well, you know what? I think there is a difference. When I was in high school, one time some girl told me that, when a black woman marries a white man, she's moving up, and if she marries a black man, she's moving down. And I'm like, that didn't make no sense to me. and this was 1998.
No, look. Let me jump right in. I once was dating an African American woman, and she told me that if she has a child, she wants a daughter because black boys are hard in terms of like black. This is before Black Lives Matter. There's a whole reality of us denying the truth of this thing, and what we do is we create narratives. Yvette, follow me. We create narratives that black men have a abundance of options of these other women, and they just choosing these women. And they pushing aside black women without talking to specific people. Or we create narratives around knowing one black guy with a Filipino lady and saying all the black men are choosing Filipino ladies. Let me give a little data. I'm good for that. IamDiversity.com. It did this study where it just analyzed who people were marrying in Asian groups. The Asian group is an interesting one because you got Indians inside of there. Talking about Indians with the dot are inside of the group with Japanese and Filipinos and Chinese. Now, what's weird is you rarely ever see an Indian with a Chinese man, right? But that's in group. So what you see is when you look at the women of the Asian Indian women, 88% of the time they marry other Asian Indian men. But when they dip out, they don't choose other Asian men. They choose white men 7% of the time. And of all the other Asians, they choose 4% of the time. And the number for black folk, they choose black men 0% of the time from the data. Now let's look at Filipinos. Filipinos marry other Filipinos 75.6% of the time. But when they leave the group, they don't choose other Asians. They don't choose other Asians. All the different kinds of Asians. No, they choose white folk 12% of the time. They choose all the other Asians 9.4% of the time. They choose black men by the data 0% of the time. I think what's starting to happen is that people are, and I'm gonna ask you this question, Yvette. People are starting to build opinions on one example that they know or two examples at a hospital. You work as a nurse at a hospital that has an overrepresentation of educated Filipino women, and say, out of like 20 of them, 2 of them are with black men, and you say, well, it's 20%, it's 10% of the time. When that's not a sampling at all. What do you think, Yvette?
Well, yeah, I think we have to. I think we take examples and we blow them up. But even when you blow them up, the two reactions that really stand out to me, the reaction to Byron Allen was very different than the reaction to Serena Williams. And it was very interesting simply because I wasn't even talking about whether or not I approved of Byron Allen's life. That wasn't even a part of the conversation. At that time, we were talking about a court case, and we were talking about charter, and we were talking about wealth, and people couldn't even like hear him just to talk about what he knew about, which was his companies and being locked out of access. But like we kind of celebrate Serena and the new baby and nobody wants to say nobody.
What's a trip, Yvette? No, what's a trip? Somebody brought this up in chat. We're Christian, so is it better to be with somebody from an African country that's Muslim than being with a white Christian? I'm trying to understand this thing. I'm trying to follow this logic that everybody's using. And so much of it seems like Racecraft, exactly what's in that book. And I advise everybody, pick up the book, read a little bit about concepts around it, data. I come back to it, and I firmly believe that the flexibility that we give, say like Asians, that means that you can marry. So an Asian person can marry a Japanese, a Chinese, an Indian, all these different kinds of Asian people. And they avoid all of them. And then in their culture, if you really know it, they're okay to marry white as well. Like, think about the range and number of people that you get to choose from, let alone the number of people who have some level of wealth. Whereas with black people, there's this constrained reality that you have to marry other black folk to be accepted. And I'm not saying all of us follow that logic, because we don't. We're growing and we're expanding. But we got to start questioning, where does that come from, and does it make sense? Does it make sense to use the logic that I said before, where somebody that's Asian, somebody that's American Indian can basically marry a Chinese man and be within race? Think about that. An Asian Indian can marry a Chinese man and be within race. So much of this is just, I don't think we've challenged the boundaries. Yvette, caller, I thank you for calling in. I'm going to come to you, Yvette, with the hard question as we start to move towards the closeout. And the question that everybody's going to ask is, how does this jive with slavery and reparations? Can we hold on to lineage claims due from slavery and Jim Crow and let go of the abnormality that's housed inside a race?
Yeah, but I think we have to. I think we have to. And I think a great example is that the Jewish people did that. They came here and all of y'all white now, but y'all still getting your papers. Y'all still, you still get your reparations over there, and you still get money from Barack Obama and everybody else, but you still white. You can. I think you can do both. I think you should do both. But I think, people be like, well, it's black and racial. No, nobody's black never was a thing. They made up black. White people made up black. They decided what white was, and they decided what black was. They decided that white was everybody except us, no matter how they look, whether you were swarthy Italian or whether you were an Irish immigrant, or Greek with olive skin or whatever, you got to be white. And so you got to, but everybody over here. And then they said, well, it's one drop rule, so if you got a Negro in you got to stay over there. All of this was to entrench the failure in our category, right? And that's what it was. It's not about whether or not you get to marry a white person. It's about how you locked us over here. And how you tried to say that we're not American. We're just as American as you.
Queen Nazuri, I shout you out because you support both of our channels, and we all gonna build and have this discussion. You said to be something about having two black parents. Well, I challenge that because I'm questioning: are we talking about two black parents that are descendants of American slavery, native blacks, or are we just saying any African country, from Ethiopia to South Africa? And so, I challenge that because now, if you're saying that, does it also include people who sold us into slavery? So you as a black person can marry somebody whose family sold you into slavery, and you're within race.
Queen Nazuri is my homie, though. You gotta leave Queen Nazuri alone.
No, I'm asking the question. She's my homie too. We're out here having the discussion. Because for too long, we haven't had this discussion. We've left it as a simple concept of white and black, of basically, all the white people had slaves, and we hand over so much power when we say that. Because as you showed with your recent show with the Irish and the Italians and the Poles, that white people are made up of a mixture as well. And so my purpose of this show is really to challenge the boundaries of race. I believe people should be with who they love, but I believe also one of the solutions, everybody asks us for a solution, but it sounds like they got their own solution, and that's black families to be rich in America despite the fact that America is what it is. And what I'm saying to you is one of the solutions is to be honest about your place in America, the good and the bad of it, the slave owner and the slave master, the reality of you built this place and you were built upon. And I think that for a lot of us, that's a hard challenge to take on. What we rather do is go watch Black Panther that celebrates the Dahomey women who were modeled after, the Dilamage or whatever, who were modeled after the Dahomey women that were part of a slave trading whole setup. It makes no sense. And I hope that this starts a good dialogue on my channel. I hope that this starts a dialogue in your families and at home, because I don't have all the answers, and I don't think you do. I don't think Yvette thinks she does. But we got to start somewhere and start building this out. Yvette, any last words on this topic?
No, I just want to say that, you're one of the things that we have to come to terms with. We're just as American as anybody else, if not more American, right? And that doesn't mean, so you have to understand, that doesn't mean that you are your government. One of the things that we have to come outside of is this idea, well, I'm not American. America does all this dirt. Yeah, America does a lot of dirt abroad and to us. We know better than anybody what the government does. That doesn't make you any less American than anybody else. And so for somebody to use any kind of con to try to put you on the bottom or to effectively put you on the bottom over generations is problematic.
Yvette, I'm going to take one last caller. I'm going to take one last call. This is the last caller tonight. Caller, what's your name? Where are you calling from? Well, nonetheless, what I appreciate is that you guys give us the space to have this discussion. Nowhere on the YouTube, nowhere on the internet, nowhere on TV are we challenging race, are we challenging culture, are we challenging the reality of what America has done here, both historically and in present day, the way it's happening on Tone Talks and Breaking Brown. Yvette, you want to tell them about Breaking Brown and where they can find you?
Yeah, find me every Monday and Wednesday at 9:15 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. You can find me at Breaking Brown, Twitter, at Facebook, Facebook.com/Yvette Carnell. And we'll continue these conversations.
We're going to continue this discussion here on Tone Talks as well. You know, I always appreciate you guys because it's Friday night. I know you could be out doing all kinds of things, but you're here with me, sharing and building and having a great dialogue. I appreciate you guys tuning in. I will see you next week. Thank you for tuning in to Tone Talks.